He's a Marine Corps veteran, a husband, and a father of four. Now he's running for Congress in Maryland's 6th District. In a divided political landscape, he's stepping forward, not with a party script, but with a story, a mission, and a challenge to the status quo. This is Mid-Maryland Votes, where we talk to those who want to lead and ask why they think they're ready. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
Tonight we have Chris Burnett, who is running for the 6th Congressional District. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys tonight. I just retired from the Marine Corps in February of this year. As I was getting out, I was at a bit of a crossroads, and so I had to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life after serving on active duty for almost 22 years.
So, Chris, you said you were in the Marine Corps?
I was, yes, the Marine Corps.
So I was in the military, too. I was in the Air Force. Ethan was kind of in the military. He was in the Navy.
Absolutely. I was at Bethesda Naval Hospital around D.C.
He was with the guys that pick up you guys, the Marines, and then drop you off in the war, and then they go home. That's what they do.
One of my best experiences was on a Marine expeditionary unit with sailors.
That's good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I give him a hard time, but my dad was Navy for 22 years. He was a corpsman. So you said you retired from the Marine Corps as an officer, right? You were in the...
Yep, I 22 years as a judge advocate, or I was a lawyer for the Marine Corps. The next 22 years on active duty, focusing primarily on international and operational law.
Where do you live at, first of all, Chris?
Sure. So we live in Gaithersburg, which is right at the very bottom of CD6. So that CD6 runs from about Gaithersburg, where I live. I'm about a mile from the line, all the way out to Garrett. So all of Western Maryland. We came here in 2021, right as I was coming off of my 5th deployment. So I was meeting up with my wife and kids. She was living in Florida with our 4 kids. We met in Maryland. When we moved to Montgomery County, we thought it was like anywhere else with good schools and good activities. We had no idea just how deep blue Montgomery County could be.
That's a way to describe it, deep blue.
To be honest, I never thought I was going to stay in the Marine Corps for 22 years. And there were times being a lawyer, I was very frustrated because I wanted to serve in a more direct capacity. I didn't like the idea of at times being in an advisory role, even though I stepped out as often as I could to be a company commander, an acting XO of a MU, commander of troops on the USS Boxer. But what kept me in, of course, was the Marines. I loved every second that I spent serving alongside or with Marines in any capacity, across 5 combat deployments and I think 6 or 7 duty assignments in the United States.
Well, we appreciate your service, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now you're running for Congress. So District 6 is an interesting district. It's called the Pterodactyl District. And do you know why?
I'm not familiar with the pterodactyl moniker,
so
but
it looks a little like a pterodactyl
idea
when you look at it. And of course, there was some legal action about gerrymandering of the district. So the district was extended into the area you live in, down into northern Montgomery County, in an effort to include more blue voters in it because it was a historically red district. So
it's funny how you mentioned that because I'm familiar with the gerrymandering, and I'm one of the saying, I try to close every speech that I give or introduction I give is to make Western Maryland red again, because the gerrymandering really affected the voice of a lot of people across Western Maryland. They feel like they don't have any voice. They have no say whatsoever. And they're just sort of along for the ride in a gerrymandered district. And it's really unfortunate. And I think it's been discouraging for folks to have to get the short end of some Maryland policies that have really affected the quality of life for working families and small businesses.
Yeah, and that's, there was one of the predecessors of whose shoes you want to step into. Roscoe Bartlett was he was a representative in this area for CD6 for decades.
I think 9 or 400 years. I'm not sure exactly what Roscoe.
Something along those lines.
Roscoe served with Methuselah, if I believe correctly.
I heard him speak about a year and a half ago, and he's in his late 90s, I believe, but he is sharp as a tack. But what happened, of course, is when they gerrymandered the district, after decades of being in office and reelected by the constituents, he ended up losing. And ever since then, it has been Democrat congressmen and congresswomen since that time. And so you are here to change that, it sounds like.
Not only change it, but also represent the interests of the district. The last, Trone and Delaney live in CD8, right? I don't know if Trone lived in CD8, but certainly Delaney lives in CD8 in a $4 million mansion. She does not have the daily experience that families like mine and the families like most of the residents of CD6 are experiencing. But not only is she out of touch, she doesn't act as a voice for anyone, Democrats or Republicans.
Right.
She doesn't do a whole lot, at least not what I can follow. And I know that there's been some controversy lately. There's been a few videos released about her insider type trading, or there was accusations of her. There were allegations that nothing's been proven. But certainly she's on a couple of committees that benefit from the biotech industry. So it's interesting.
What's unfortunate is that some of the insider trading that we observe is not illegal for Congress. That was certainly something I would be opposed to. As a single income military family, there's absolutely no reason to go to Congress other than to serve your constituents. If you're going there to get rich, if you're going there to pad your nest egg, you're there for the wrong reasons. And so I believe that's why she's there. I believe that's why she's earned the moniker Do-nothing Delaney, because all she's managed to do is really repeat National Democratic Party talking points and has done absolutely nothing for the residents of CD6.
Mm-hmm. And to your point that living outside of the district, that she does not have a day-to-day understanding of what life is like in Western Maryland. Western Maryland is very different than Central Maryland, Montgomery County, or even the Eastern Shore, as beautiful as the Eastern Shore is. And so for those values and such to be represented, I guess what is it that you would like to kind of your top few priorities?
Well, first is the cost of living and looking at how we can make daily life better for CD6 residents. And it starts with getting taxes under control in any way, shape, or form that we can lower the nickel and dime tax and spend approach that Maryland residents have been suffering under. Anything that I can do to ease that pain would be priority number one. I think what goes along with less taxes is less regulation. Right now, if you want to start a business in Montgomery County, and I think Frederick County is a close second to this, it's almost impossible. You're looking at a year of permits and reviews and all sorts of hurdles that really undermine the entrepreneurial spirit that drives the Western Maryland economy. So if we can lower taxes, less regulation, and create opportunity, that would be the starting point as to how I would like on a day-to-day basis approach legislation that I would review or introduce as a congressman.
And some of these things, of course, are the purview of the state and not necessarily anything that the federal government would do. But to your point, I believe that in Maryland, the per capita income, we are number 11. We are the 11th highest per capita income, which is not a bad thing. However, we are the 5th highest in the cost of living. So there is quite a difference between how expensive it is to live in Maryland and comparatively how much less income the average Marylander has for that cost. And a lot of that, to your point, is from taxes. I mean, I guess, is that what is kind of your view on how to tackle these large spending increases that have happened even at the federal level?
Well, one, I'd like to address the point you made about county and state level taxes and fees. Ideally, we can lead from the top down. And what I mean by that is we've had little to no success making inroads at the city and county level. But if we can shift the narrative by upholding some sense of fiscal responsibility, accountability at the federal level, working with the speaker, working with President Trump and his administration, we can reset the conversation. And I think we can begin to influence at the state, county, and city level. So where I can involve myself directly, I will. And where we can shift the narrative and lead from the top down, that's also would be a priority. And that is resetting expectations that conservatives can win in Western Maryland. And not only can they win, they can help set an agenda at a local level to effectuate real change. But to your second question there, the steps that I would want to take would be to first approach everything that we do from a Doge lens. Is this the most efficient or most optimized way to proceed? And what I mean by that is to use a scalpel and to look at redundancy, to look at the unnecessary spending, to look at the performance of a contract, to look at the performance of duty. And if you do that, you can then start to incorporate those fiscally responsive practices. And then you can get into how we're spending money and then being able to tax less, or looking at how we're using that money to create opportunity in Western Maryland, rather than just spending endlessly, thinking that if we just throw more money at a problem, it will go away.
I appreciate that very much, because cost of living is getting crazy in Maryland.
Yep.
We're the fifth most expensive state to live in, and salaries, especially in Western Maryland, are not going to keep up with that. So in the mid-Maryland area, our voters, one of the biggest things that they really are concerned about, especially in the Hagerstown area, is the presence of crime, and supporting our police, and obviously supporting the military during these times right now. What's your stance on that, and where do you see that going?
First of all, I start with absolute support for law enforcement, upholding the rule of law, and then taking and pulling that thread so that we're prioritizing individual safety, individual ability to function in their own communities. I think we take for granted that if we want to defund the police and we want to take a softer approach to crime, that's putting people unnecessarily at risk. That's not putting their tax dollars to work. That's not protecting the people that need protection. I think we have to reset priorities around personal accountability, enforcing the laws, and at 100% supporting law enforcement. And then that naturally extends to protecting veterans and supporting the military. We kind of lose sight at times of supporting the military is not just saying thank you for your service. It means that we're going to prioritize their interests and needs. And if that means we can create an easier situation for families that are subject to moving every 2 to 3 years, then that's what I would want to do for military families. But along those same lines, I think law enforcement at times are taken for granted. I've said it before, it was easier to go outside of the wire in Iraq than I think for some of these police officers to leave their home, their children, their family, go out to the unknown, and then have to come home again, regardless of what they've encountered. So I can't stress that enough, that we start with enforcing the laws that are on the books, supporting law enforcement unequivocally, and then redistributing funds in a way that's going to support law enforcement executing their responsibility to protect and to serve, as opposed to de-escalate and absorb unnecessary risk in the name of some social agenda or DEI initiative.
And when related to that, of course, I believe there are issues around immigration, and particularly in Maryland, where Maryland is describing itself as a sanctuary state, Frederick as a sanctuary city, I believe. And, I was driving through Frederick just last weekend, and I saw, I assume it was ICE. They had police written across their chest. They were arresting someone who clearly looked like they were an immigrant, and but they had masks on their faces, and I assume that is because apparently assaults against police officers, ICE agents, are up like 400% as a result of this. And then, of course, the national news with Abrego Garcia coming back to the United States. I guess what is your take on the deportations and how we are going about doing that as a nation?
That's a great question, because this issue hits close to home for me. My wife is a naturalized U.S. citizen from West Africa. She grew up in Guinea. She came to the United States under a political asylum banner, and then she went through the process lawfully. I went through that process with her as a married couple. Our 4 children are biracial. They have family that is here that are naturalized U.S. citizens, and we still have family in West Africa. And I can tell you across her whole family, we're extremely sympathetic to the difficulty of coming to the United States, integrating, and then making yourself a part of a productive member of society. But I will, from across her experience and her family, there has to be an adherence to the rules. This country runs on the hard work of immigrants and the great work that they do, but you have to do it in accordance with the rules. And if that means you came here illegally, then we've got to take a long, hard look at making sure that there is either appropriate steps that are taken by Congress to give you a pathway that could include some type of a penalty or a fine, or more importantly, that if you've stepped out of line in any way, shape, or form to include that initial entry, you would be subjected to deportation. And that's not meant to be personal. It's not meant to be insensitive. It's simply the rule of law. And if we don't like that, then we should address that in Congress. But until we do, we absolutely have to support law enforcement. We absolutely have to support ICE in their mission to uphold the law and effectuate deportation orders. And I know it's going to be difficult, but sometimes doing the right thing is difficult. And I feel like we're in one of those places. And thankfully, there's been some strong leadership here that says we're going to draw a line and we're going to fix this. And it starts with clearing out what has been an overdue backlog. And we're going to move forward with some effort to acknowledge the contribution that we've received, as well as not allowing this to happen again.
Yeah, I think that two-prong approach is what most people in Maryland want to see. They want to see the laws enforced. They want to see criminals deported, but they also would like to see a pathway to hardworking people to be able to come to the country, because our country is founded on immigrants and hardworking immigrants. There being a pathway, I think that is a great opportunity for a lot of people. So I'm glad to hear that that's part of your candidacy as well. I was curious as to how you feel about the case today in Montgomery County was determined about parental rights.
Another great question. I have 4 kids, 2 little ones, kindergartner and a second grader now, rising first grader, rising third grader. So this also hit very close to home. I remember when we first arrived, we were still settling into being in Montgomery County and not living in Florida anymore. And I remember receiving the opt-out sheet from where my kids go to school. And I was appreciative of that choice. And then as that escalated to so many families had elected to opt out that they now were no longer going to offer that. I thought the law was clear going into this, that they had overstepped their authority and said there is no opt out.
When you say they, Chris, who do you, just for our viewers?
The Montgomery County School Board.
Okay, so the court case was, a bunch of parents who were suing the Montgomery County School Board for the option to opt out of certain sexually explicit schooling.
Yes.
And Montgomery County, we did a podcast on this very issue. So if people want to refer to that, they can get all the facts. But just to summarize, it was a coalition of different people, different ethnicities, different religions, who all wanted the option of opting out of this curriculum. The school board and the school curriculum made it mandatory.
Yes.
And also reassigned it to the English department so that it couldn't be opted out as part of the curriculum. Today, the Supreme Court determined that was illegal, and they actually affirmed parental rights. So that's what we're talking about, because I just wanted to clarify that a little bit.
And I appreciate that. That's a great summary. The short version, looking at that as a lawyer, I thought precedent was clear that the parental rights there was significant precedent supporting that. But what was interesting was how they had to go about tackling this, which was to say, this is a free exercise, a part of the free exercise clause. You cannot interfere with a parental discretion as to how they're going to receive this type of material. And I thought it was a great victory for parental rights. I thought it was a great victory for religious freedom. I thought it was fascinating that I think you had some very various backgrounds. I want to say you had Muslim, Jewish, and Christian backgrounds. I think you had some folks, of all different ethnicities that said, look, this is unacceptable. What I don't understand is how not a single Democrat lawmaker at the county or city level came out against this, when this is essentially a 90-10 issue. Who in their right mind would say that a school or an administrator knows better than a parent in terms of explicit material being presented under the auspices of inclusive education?
Who would say it is the teachers union?
Which is unbelievable.
Which was one of the most powerful lobbying entities in Maryland, is the teachers union.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer a union; it's a political activist club, is what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's a short version. I couldn't have been more satisfied that the court ruled in accordance with precedent and in favor of parental rights.
Any parent, Democrat, Republican, or independent, who gives up their parental rights to the state or to the school system, shame on them.
I guess, do you think there's a role at the federal level to ensure that parental rights can be enshrined at and by states to some degree, or do you think that that is purely a state's issue?
I believe it. When you look at the Constitution, I think there's protections in place, and I think that it's going to be implemented at the state level, and it would be reviewed for whether or not it's in accordance with the Constitution. So I don't think another federal law is needed. I think you simply need to apply the Constitution to efforts at the state level. And that's, in my opinion, that's the system working. I'm not a big fan of trying to over-regulate. We just pass more laws. I think we use the current system to its optimal capacity and leverage the federal Constitution and the Bill of Rights against state laws or state efforts to infringe on those. And if the system is working, you've got an engaged parents or you've got an engaged electorate, then that process should work. But the last thing we need is more laws to tell us what we already know or is already codified elsewhere.
I like that answer quite a bit. I guess another question I have is in regards to running and winning. So obviously, you are a primary candidate, so you have to be the top vote getter in the Republican primary. At this point, I believe there's only one other person who is officially running. His name is Robin Ficker, who has run for a number of offices over the years. I guess how do you see your campaign progressing, and how do you plan to win the primary?
First, I like Robin. He's a great guy, tremendous energy. I think he's run for everything in the state that you can run for, and he's been a strong advocate in the face of opposition. So I commend him for his effort, and I look forward to working alongside him to ensure that the best possible candidate is going to emerge from the primary. But in terms of my approach to the primary, I'm looking at this from day one as a campaign to win. I'm not trying to raise awareness. I'm not trying to serve as opposition to educate an incumbent. The idea is we're going to focus the campaign on getting a message out of economic opportunity, less regulation, and how we can better serve the constituents of CD6. When you go out to Western Maryland, there is a sense that they've had no voice and absolutely no say in their own lives. If we can mobilize them, get them out to vote, to offset the existing Democrat majority in the district, I think we can make a lot of progress. And what's interesting is this is a closed primary, so you have to campaign to only registered Republicans that will participate in the primary to get through the primary. And then you have a significant number of unaffiliated voters in Frederick and Montgomery County that you now have to be able to address their interests and concerns. And so my effort is going to be consistency from day one all the way through to the general election to better represent the values and interests of all of Western Maryland, and to approach this from day one with an eye towards winning. And what I mean by that is to build on the great work of Neil Perry. He did a phenomenal job raising the gerrymandering issue, getting the district where it's at and making it competitive, and then stepping off where he left this last year and coming up with a campaign to get Delaney out of the way and actually bring some common sense and some common values back to CD6.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that Neil might be running against you?
It is possible. I've reached out to him and I've asked that if he's not running, that I'd love to have his support. And if he were to run, then we would have a different message, I believe. He's run 3 times and he's made a Herculean effort to move the ball forward. I do think Western Maryland needs a new voice. I think Western Maryland needs a new approach. And that's exactly what I'm bringing to this campaign. Is I came off of 22 years of active duty, and I've learned some invaluable lessons across 5 combat deployments and raising a family of 4 on a single military income. My experience is the experience of most people, I think, in CD6. My wife is a naturalized U.S. citizen. We have 4 kids going through Montgomery County schools. We want them to be rewarded on ability and merit and not be indoctrinated with DEI efforts and initiatives. And ultimately, what we want to do is be able to thrive in a state that we've come to love. The reason why I'm running is for the first time in almost a quarter of a century, I got to choose where I wanted to live. I choose to live here, and I'm now choosing to run for Congress to try to make a difference for families like mine.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we call it an interview?
I hope I get a chance to come and talk to you again. This has been fantastic, and I think there's a lot more we could talk about. So if you have time in the future, I'd love to come back.
Without question, we'd love to have you back. You're very eloquent, even for a Marine. You do very, very well. So.
Well, we eat crayons for lunch. So,
well, we had a good time with you. We enjoyed you. I think you did a great job putting yourself out there as a viable and strong candidate for this District 6 position.
Yep. And hopefully, I'm sure we'll be able to talk again. And I look forward to it.
Great. Thanks again, gentlemen.
All right. Thanks again for being with us. Hey, this has been Mark Flynn and my co-host,
Ethan Lowen,
and our guest, Chris Burnett, who's running for District 6 Congress. Please give him a look-see. Chris, do you have a web page you'd like them to look at?
I do. Thank you. It's www.burnettforcongress.com. The email is vote@burnettforcongress.com.
Great. Wonderful. And thanks again for being with us. Once again, if you'd like to support Chris, please look him up on the Facebook page, and also there'll be a link in the comment section to his webpage. We wish you the best of luck, Chris. Thanks for coming out with us.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes. Whether you agree or not, we're glad you listened. Our goal isn't to change your mind, but to open it. Here we value conversations over confrontations, ideas over insults. Democracy works best when we speak and listen with respect. Join us next time as we explore the issues that matter, one civil conversation at a time. Until then, stay informed, stay kind, and stay involved. Thank you.